And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is November 17th, 321st day of the year. Just 44 days remain to the year's over with, and we get to start a new year. Holidays and observances. International Students Day. Take part in student events, talk to other students, help shape the future of education. National Take a Hike Day. National Homemade Bread Day. National Reuben Day. Zinfandel Day. World Prematurity Day. National Baklava Day. Crispy layers of pastry and that oozes sweetness and nuts, giving a satisfying crunch. And a National Happy Ghost Day, unique brew that balances zesty tanginess with a hint of salt, making every sip a refreshing journey. National Unfriend Day, in the realm of social media, occasionally parting ways with unfamiliar faces can be refreshingly liberated. And a National Survivors of Suicide Loss Day, National Testosterone Awareness Day, National Butter Day, Struggle for Freedom and Democracy Day, Enterprise Week, Artes Mundi, Benjamin Banneker Week. As a remarkable individual, made history with his achievements in science and engineering and dedication to knowledge. Book Week Scotland, Transgender Awareness Week, as if we're allowed to forget. The Cairo International Film Festival, a major event in films. Geography Awareness Week, Road Safety Week, American Education Week. Famous people born on this date: Danny DeVito, Martin Scorsese, RuPaul, Tom Ellis, and Jeff Buckley. Well, on that note, let's see what stories we have in the news today. A blue city, or a Democrat-controlled city, emerges as a major human trafficking hub. Has gangs exploiting minors. The gangs and the highways fuel a perfect storm of child exploitation, according to experts. There's been a rise in human trafficking cases throughout one of the nation's most populous states, putting both experts and parents on alert. Data indicates that criminals are targeting children in unprecedented numbers. North Carolina is ranked 9th in the country for human trafficking. That's according to data from the National Human Trafficking Hotline. 2024, the state identified 301 cases of human trafficking involving 580 victims. The cases involve instances of sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and additional types of exploitation that may not be specified or even remain unknown, according to the hotline. In North Carolina, data indicates that in 2024, there were 145 reported cases of sex trafficking, 73 cases of labor trafficking, and 38 cases of both sex and labor trafficking. It's interesting to note that it's North Carolina, which is a very regulated state on the East Coast, has these issues. Well, according to Newt Gingrich, the simplest way to make American life affordable again is not hard to figure out. Americans have given the same message for the last 2 elections: make life affordable again. They're tired of working harder for less. Cost of everything from housing to education and insurance keeps rising. Affordability crisis touches every household. This silly Schumer shutdown apparently arose out of the Democrats' desire to give free health care to anybody and everybody who can manage to get across the border. at the cost to the taxpayer. Healthcare now consumes nearly 1/5 of our economy. It's the highest single cost for employers, fastest growing burden on families, and the quietest drain on national growth. Every dollar businesses spend on bloated health costs is a dollar not available for higher wages or new jobs or investment. And it's not that Washington ignores healthcare. It's that it thinks too narrowly, according to Gingrich. Politicians obsess over temporary subsidies and tax credits and program expansions to make insurance more expensive to subsidize, but never make care itself more affordable. The simplest medication is usually unbelievably expensive. Well, President Trump reveals that Maduro would like to talk as military options remain on the table for Venezuela. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro wants talks with the U.S. as tensions mount between the two countries, but stressed he hadn't planned nor authorized any land-based military strikes against the South American nation. Having spent several years in South America, I can tell you that it's combat operations there can be quite difficult. Prince William, according to reports, has shattered royal parenting rules after a painful childhood. He's protecting his children after enduring pain and drama in his own past. This claim came from multiple royal experts after Brazilian TV host Luciano Huck interviewed the Prince of Wales during his trip to Brazil for the Earthshot Prize Awards. During the conversation, the heir to the British throne shared that he and his wife, Kate Middleton, spoke openly with Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis after her cancer diagnosis and treatment. According to the Prince, hiding stuff just doesn't work. Hopefully they'll have a better upbringing than he did. An officer was injured after a suspect rammed a law enforcement vehicle during a Charlotte immigration raid. He was injured Sunday afternoon after a man allegedly drove a van toward officers and rammed their vehicles during an operation in Charlotte. There were immigration raids all across North Carolina, the North Carolina city. The suspect, who's a U.S. citizen, accelerated his van at officers conducting an enforcement operation near the University City area. That's according to a post from the Department of Homeland Security. Driver then ran, triggering a dangerous high-speed chase through a densely populated area before agents managed to box him in. During the chase, he attempted to ram into other law enforcement vehicles, posing a serious public safety threat. One officer, as I say, was injured. After the suspect was arrested, agents discovered he had a firearm inside the van. And he has prior arrests for resisting law enforcement, public disturbances, and intoxication and disruptive conduct. Encounter unfolded as federal agents launched a major immigration enforcement operation in Charlotte over the weekend. Well, Eddie Murphy has made an interesting claim. He says Yul Brynner made sexual proposition at Eddie Murphy's 21st birthday party at Studio 54. There's been a lot of rumors about some of Brenner's habits. In Netflix's documentary, Being Eddie, the actor and comedian who is now 64, recalled a sexual proposition by Yul Brynner that has stayed with him all these years. You know, Studio 54 had a strange reputation in and of itself. Well, Ukrainian major urges the U.S. to send Tomahawks as clashes with Russian forces intensify. Sending the Tomahawks would, of course, raise the danger of an all-out war between Russia and us. And, as fighting between Russia and Ukrainian troops continues on the eastern front line in Donetsk, Kharkiv, and other regions, a senior Ukrainian commander involved in the fighting has appealed to the Trump administration to send Tomahawk missiles. Major Ole Shurev, commander of the 225th Battalion in northern Ukraine, holding the line and hoping for more U.S. support, as if the billions we've given is not sufficient support. He said the main thing we need is long-range missiles. The war is the biggest war in the world since World War II, according to the Major. Ukraine's fight, he stressed, is not just to free itself from Russian aggression. Moscow sought to keep Ukraine in the sphere of influence since gaining independence from the Soviet Union in 1991. In fending off Russia's invasion, Ukraine's looking to fulfill their 30-year hope of gaining complete independence from Moscow's grip. According to the Major, for the last 300 years, our confrontation, that is the confrontation between Ukraine and Russia, has been our chance to gain independence. And he believes they're going to win the war, but they need even more help than they've been given. We've given billions, and it's now come to light that a lot of it is slowly disappeared. Well, an ancient snack bar has hidden an Egyptian secret, buried for nearly 2,000 years. Archaeologists recently unveiled an Egyptian vase inside what was once a fast food kitchen in Pompeii. On November 6th Facebook post, the Pompeii Archaeological Park said the ceramic spatula, or vase, was found in the Thermopylae in Regio 5, an ancient snack bar. The glazed vessel, usually found in the Vesuvian area as a prized decorative object in gardens or representative spaces, was evidently reused here as a kitchen container. Excuse me. Well, Dr. Mehmet Oz teases the Trump administration's plan to overhaul Obamacare. President Trump's again hinted at plans to replace the Affordable Care Act, teasing a possible Republican alternative during a recent interview with Fox News. On Sunday, Dr. Oz, the head of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, elaborated on what such a plan might entail, emphasizing greater consumer choice, lower prescription drug costs, and expanded access for small business owners. He told Peter Doocy on the Sunday briefing, people will decide which doctors they want to keep. They'll pay for the programs they think are most valuable to them, and we can save enough money in the ACA as it's currently structured if we adjust where the money's invested and drive prices down, actually give people some money back, and we want that. I know as I get older and need more medication, I've been amazed at the prices. Well, Seattle's socialist mayor may be less constrained than Mamdani, Washington Post warns. Seattle Mayor-elect Katie Wilson may be even worse than New York City's Mayor-elect Mamdani. That's according to the Washington Post. With much of the country fixated on New York's decision to elect a mayor as mayor socialist with little experience, easy to miss the news that Seattle's done the same thing. Voters from coast to coast now get to witness two real-time experiments in radical government. Now, the problem is these two inexperienced individuals with their socialist background are going to want to try these pie-in-the-sky programs that have never worked. Well, portfolio diet gains buzz for lowering cholesterol without medication, according to experts. It's a plant-based eating plan known as the portfolio diet, gaining attention for its potential to lower cholesterol. And research suggests it might be as effective as some prescription drugs. Now, it was developed by Dr. David Jenkins, a professor of nutrition and medicine at the University of Toronto and a clinician scientist at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, Canada. The diet focuses on specific plant-based foods that have been shown to lower LDL, or the bad cholesterol, and support overall heart health. Well, there's been a lot of outrage over 100,000 trees have been cleared from the world's largest rainforest for the climate summit, We're going to get together and pontificate about what we can do to make the world better for all the far left people who believe in climate warming. Well, President Trump calls on the House Republicans, to vote to release the Epstein files. He said, we ain't got anything to hide. And accusing the Democrats of using the case as a distraction from GOP accomplishments. In a Truth Social post on Sunday, President Trump urged House Republicans to vote in favor of releasing the documents, describing the controversy as a Democrat hoax perpetuated by radical left lunatics. Well, let's see what else we got. Well, a track star who protested trans athlete alleges she wasn't given her medal for months as punishment until she had to file a lawsuit. Nothing's going to stop Lexa Anderson from stepping off the medal podium that night on May 30th. Now, one of the biological males up there, too. She had finished third place in the girls' state championship high jump, making her final Oregon high school track performance after 4 years of competition and training. But she wouldn't see that medal for all that hard work for a number of months, she claims. After she and fellow high jump podium finisher Reese Eckerd, who finished in fourth, stepped down from the podium to protest a trans athlete who finished fifth. Anderson alleged she was forced out of the championship photo and never given her third place medal. Yes, we must protect the rights of the transgenders, those males who identify as females. They have more right to be praised than do actual people born female. Well, President Trump had sent to host Saudi Arabia's powerful crown prince at the White House this week. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman going to be at the White House this week for high-level talks aimed at deepening economic and defense ties. According to President Trump, on Friday en route to Florida for the weekend, we're more than meeting, we're honoring Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince. It's not formally a state visit, but the plans do include a welcome ceremony with military bands, a bilateral meeting in the Oval Office, and a black-tie dinner in the evening. Well, Pawn Stars Rick Harrison is backing President Trump on America's deadly fentanyl epidemic, fighting terrorist dealers. He compared drug dealers to terrorists as he continued his crusade to fight the fentanyl epidemic in the U.S. He praised President Trump's efforts to curb the distribution of the illegal synthetic drug. He remains hopeful President Trump could save lives nearly 2 years after Harrison lost his own son to an overdose. I've never understood the need to take shelter through the use of drugs of that type. Chick-fil-A is testing new sandwiches in 2 cities for a limited time. It's used to enjoy going there, but now the schedule's such we don't have the time to eat out much. Well, the VA is going to restore education benefits eligibility to veterans ousted under Biden-era COVID vaccine mandates. Yes, if you didn't take a Biden-prescribed vaccine, you could lose your benefits. And this major policy shift could restore education benefits to thousands of veterans who were separated from military service for refusing the COVID vaccine during the Biden administration. That's according to the VA. This move follows President Trump's January Executive Order 14184, reinstating service members discharged under the military's COVID vaccination mandate. In response, Secretary War Hegseth went on to instruct military departments to facilitate discharge upgrades for those who were involuntarily separated because they declined the COVID vaccine. They got this characterization of their service could have definitely affect benefits. Well, Stephen Smith says prominent Democrats have declined invitations to appear on this show. Excuse me. They're going to punish those who support President Trump. And the Marines exchanged gunfire with suspected gang members in Haiti, according to officials. U.S. Marines protecting the American Embassy in Haiti exchanged gunfire with suspected gang members last week. Captain Stephen Keenan told Fox News Digital in an email statement that Sunday Marines supporting embassy security operations were fired on by suspected gang members in the capital city of Port-au-Prince. And they returned that fire on the evening of November 13th. You don't want to upset the Marines. They can give you a completely bad day. Well, President Trump has unveiled plans to power America's nuclear comeback under the previous administration. A lot of advances were put to the side because they didn't fit in with the liberal left's strange plans. Well, we've been talking about a lot of off-the-wall things. And this first story we're going to do tonight, I call it giving credit where credit is due. You know, in computer and the internet, been a lot of advancements. Wireless communication, for example. But do you have any idea who actually came up with that? Not some scientist sitting in an ivory tower laboratory. A Hollywood actress by the name of Hedy LaMarr. Now, she wasn't just a pretty face, she was actually a genius. But of course, you don't hear about that because it doesn't fit in with the pre-existing theories, I guess you could say. You know, the first time audiences ever laid eyes on Hedy LaMarr, she was running naked through an open field. Second time, she appeared lost in the throes of an unmistakable, vivid climax. And when she returned to the screen more than 5 years later, she had shed her past identity, she spoke a new language, had a new name, and radiated a new persona. But her effect remained unchanged. Her mere presence could still bring Hollywood and the audiences who worshipped it to a standstill. Now, that change in name couldn't erase the shadow of the movie called Ecstasy, the film that both made and marked her. For many, many years, she was called the Ecstasy Girl. Became infamous as the face of a European art picture so provocative it drew condemnation from the Pope himself. When a distributor tried to bring that film to America, it was ruled dangerously indecent and barred from being released nationwide. But the true outrage wasn't nudity. Oh no, it was the pleasure. In that film, a young woman deserts her husband, runs free through the countryside, meets a passionate lover, and experiences unrestrained ecstasy before the camera's gaze. The question lingered in more or less minds, what might women everywhere do now that they had seen one reveal so openly in desire? You know, I've heard a lot of opinions by so-called moral experts over the years about what women should and shouldn't do. And half the time, they don't have a clue what they're talking about. With careful guidance from her new studio, LaMarr publicly rejected her role in Ecstasy, but the label of the desiring woman would haunt her career. Throughout her time in Hollywood, she was repeatedly cast as the elegant fallen woman. Character whose beauty and sensuality made her both irresistible and doomed. Kind of woman the world couldn't help but punish. She was never celebrated for her acting. Her talent lay not in her delivery, but in her just very presence. Those deep liquid eyes and a mouth once described as a poppy in full bloom. What she lacked in dramatic range, she more than made up for in magnetism. But beneath the surface of that glamour was a startling intellect. She was by all accounts a mathematical thinker, a shrewd business mind, and a self-taught inventor who would one day help lay the foundation for modern wireless communication. To put it plainly, the woman who was once hailed as the most beautiful star in pre-war Hollywood helped invent the technology that gave us cell phones and Wi-Fi. Public and the press never knew what to make of that contradiction. Hedy LaMarr, at one and the same time a sex symbol and a scientific innovator. Well, for decades, the first image eclipsed the second one. It was only after her death and after a lifetime marred by failed marriages and lawsuits and disillusionment that her reputation was transformed. From disgraced glamour girl to visionary scientist. Today, she's celebrated as a feminist trailblazer. Her likeness adorning science awards and posters meant to inspire young women to pursue technology. But the world's refusal to accept both beauty and intellect in one woman took its toll. She learned early on that her looks could open doors, but the same beauty that gave her power also confined her. In Hollywood, she became the template for the tragic seductress, worshipped and used and forgotten. The very system that built her up eventually turned her into what the tabloids called a fallen star. In actuality, she was far more complicated than that. She was brilliant, stubborn, restless, and human. For decades, that complexity was erased, flattened in a single image. Beautiful face that couldn't possibly belong to a sharp mind. Now, even before Hollywood, her life read like a script fit for the silver screen. Something between a fairy tale and a political thriller. Born Hedwig Kiesler, to prosperous Jewish parents in Vienna. Grew up in comfort and refinement. Her father was a respected banker. Indulged her curiosity, explaining how machinery worked as they walked through the city. Her mother was a pianist, gave her poise and discipline. Educated by private tutors, sent to finishing schools in Switzerland, and groomed for a glittering debut in the Viennese society. And she was strikingly beautiful even as a child. Raven-haired, pale skin, green-gray eyes that seemed too large for her face. Her mother affectionately called her Snow White. Stubborn and impulsive, Hedy herself would later remark, "I used to run my head against stone walls right through them and get hurt." But that was good for her. She learned it's better to get these bumps young. Well, her first real bump came early in life. Before she could make her debut, her father died suddenly, leaving the family nearly ruined during Austria's financial collapse. Her comfortable life vanished overnight. Ever resourceful, she invested what little money they had in the stock market and lost it all. Undeterred, she went to work, first as a secretary. People would whisper she was far too pretty for office work. And later on, through a family friend, she became a script clerk at a local film studio. And it was there, while reading through scripts and catching glances from passing directors, that she met the Czech filmmaker, Gustav Machady. He was preparing for what he called his great experimental film, and the untested Kiesler intrigued him. So he cast her in small roles to train her before giving her the lead in Ecstasy. Plot was simple. A young woman trapped in a loveless marriage to a wealthy but impotent man leaves him, returns home, finds passion with a handsome stranger. In a sequence that would shock audiences for decades, she runs naked through a meadow, swims on a lake, and most scandalously, experiences visible pleasure on screen. The scene was absolutely unprecedented. Censors were outraged, priests denounced it, audiences whispered about it. Well, to soften the outrage, distributors tried to insert a clumsy marriage subplot and dubbed in lines like, "I'm so happy we're married." They put it over the original footage. But no amount of awkward editing could disguise what ecstasy had shown. A woman who wasn't punished for desire, but transformed by it. For the rest of her life, that moment would follow Hedy LaMarr. First time the world saw her, and the scandal ensured they'd never forget her. Well, censored or not, the young woman in ecstasy became an international sensation. She'd later insist she had no idea the film would turn out quite so naughty, but she was pragmatic enough to recognize opportunity when she saw it. If the film had made her infamous, she'd make that infamy work for her. Soon after that, she joined renowned director Max Reinhardt's production of The Weaker Sex and toured across Europe, her name and notoriety growing with every stop. Across the continent, she was now the ecstasy girl, and among those captivated by her was a powerful man who would change the course of her life. Fritz Mandl, wealthy Austrian arms magnate in his early 30s. He saw LaMarr's face on the screen, decided he had to have her. Attended the opening of her play, secured an introduction, and in LaMarr's words, he negotiated a marriage. Well, she'd later describe her marriage as a gilded prison. Mandl treated her like another one of his extravagant acquisitions, beautiful, valuable, and silent. In interviews she gave later, she said he always treated me like a doll. Spent my days giving parties and going to parties and wearing the finest clothes and taking endless pleasure trips to Switzerland and North Africa and the Riviera. Outsiders might have envied that, but the glitter concealed what she called a lot of rot. The couple's dinner table often hosted Europe's most notorious figures, Mussolini, Hitler, and other fascist elites. Conversations were, by her account, a chilling mix of charm and strategy and the talk of conquest. And of course, Mandl's jealousy bordered on obsession. He was so disturbed by the film ecstasy, he scoured the globe, buying and destroying every print he could find. Searched as far as New Zealand and Japan for any trace of his wife's on-screen pleasure. Studios, shrewdly recognizing his desperation, kept producing new copies just to sell to him. Eventually, he paid a vast sum to secure the original negative in exchange for the studio's promise never to make another one. It was an act of control as much as it was an attempt to erase her past, and control to find every part of LaMarr's existence. When Mandl traveled, he confined her to her country estate to prevent her escape. When she begged for intellectual creative outlets, books and art and acting, he answered with jewels and silence. She was forbidden to laugh too loudly, to smile too freely, to show any sign of independence. Twice she tried to flee, and twice she failed. Even appealed to Max Reinhardt for help, but he declined, unwilling to risk Mandl's wrath. Eventually, she found a way to outwit her captor. She began running up extravagant bills in Vienna's luxury shops till Mandl, exasperated, shut off her credit and handed her cash instead. A lot of that money she hid away. Details of her actual escape do remain hazy, tangled in myth and contradiction. She either slipped away with her maid in the middle of the night or drugged the maid and disguised herself in her uniform and fled alone. Another version claims she hid in a brothel until it was safe to leave. Even her own memoir offered conflicting stories, and when her publishers embellished the tale, she sued them for libel. Whatever the truth might be, she did get out, and that's what mattered. By the time she got to London, she was free and penniless and determined to start over. And that's where she met Bob Ritchie, an American talent agent, who arranged an introduction to MGM's formidable head, Louis B. Mayer, who was in Europe at that time scouting talent. LaMarr, having anticipated her opportunity, packed her finest gowns and jewelry for the journey. She knew precisely how to present herself. Well, Mayer, who was notoriously wary of scandal, was also famously susceptible to glamour. Her beauty and her poised demeanor did what no publicity could. The man that refused to tolerate impropriety looked past ecstasy, past a scandal, and saw only a star. So he offered Mayer a short-term contract almost immediately, though she balked at the meager sum. But she realized how few options she had and found herself boarding the same ocean liner bound for America. Midway across the Atlantic, practicality won out, and she accepted Mayer's terms and agreed to shed her old identity. On board the ship, she signed her papers Hedy LaMarr, but soon the name was refined to Hedy LaMarr. Some accounts suggest she was renamed in tribute to silent screen star Barbara LaMarr, the woman who was too beautiful, who died tragically young in 1926. But once in Hollywood, MGM gave LaMarr the standard starlet initiation. Assigned elocution lessons. Her English was kind of rough, you have to understand. Went through endless makeup tests, costume fittings, and lighting experiments. At first, the studio tried to mold her into someone else. They tested her in platinum wigs and elaborate headdresses and even perky curls like Shirley Temple. Every look fell flat. She later said, "You know how it feels when you're wearing an unflattering hat and you just want to hide your head? Well, that's how it was with her." Eventually, MGM gave up and decided the best version of Hedy LaMarr was a natural one. Sleek back black hair parted in the middle, waves soft as silk, lashes that seemed to go on forever. Well, she became something of a fixture, though she never quite fit in. She went to studio didn't quite, frankly, know what to do with her. They already had Greta Garbo, the reigning queen of exotic mystery, and didn't need another one. And LaMarr was lonely. Europe teetered on the brink of war, and her divorce from French Mandel remained tangled in legal knots. Didn't have any real friends in Los Angeles. Relief came in the form of comedian Reggie Gardner, who, probably struck by her isolation, began taking her to Hollywood gatherings. One of those parties, she met producer Walter Wanger, who was searching for a leading lady for his new film, Algiers. Roll call for a woman whose beauty could upend an entire story. Wanger had auditioned 17 established actresses and didn't find any of them that fit. Then he met LaMarr. Didn't have to do much, frankly. She just had to exist. She was the embodiment of what the script demanded. When the film premiered, audiences were transfixed. In one scene, Charles Boyer, all smoldering charms, tells LaMarr, "You're lovely, you're marvelous." To that statement, she gave a look so perfect, half boredom, half cosmic disdain, that it became the definitive eye roll in cinematic history. Well, above everything else, she was beautiful. The press called her Vienna's gift to men and every wife's phantom rival. One particularly condescending columnist went so far as to declare that the Lord made women exciting to themselves again. According to this warped logic, modern women had lost their femininity to independence and practicality. Flat shoes, man-tailored suits, and splitting the check. LaMarr, by contrast, was portrayed as a reminder of an earlier age of lace and perfume and, well, in the history of LaMarr that was created by the studio, she became not just a movie star, but a symbol. Her image carried the weight of fantasy and nostalgia and projection, reflection of not who she was, but of what the world wanted women to be. And MGM and the fan magazines worked in perfect harmony to reshape her identity into something Americans could both adore and forgive. In this new story, she wasn't a fascist. She'd escaped her evil husband and jewel-encrusted cage to flee tyranny itself. Fan writers just reveled in that melodrama. The tale was absurdly floored, but it stuck. She was reborn as a symbol of freedom. And she wasn't a cheater. Technically, she was still married when she appeared on Reggie Gardner's arm, but her husband had locked her away, surrounded by Mussolini's guests and Nazi sympathizers, so, according to the gossip columnists, who could blame her for enjoying some freedom? And most importantly, she was no ecstasy girl. That had been a misunderstanding. She was also had another issue. Her body was considered too European by Hollywood standards. Broad shoulders, slim hip, and not voluptuous enough for the studio's preferred hourglass silhouette. MGM repeatedly demanded she reduce for roles. She found the whole thing ridiculous. Once told a magazine she hated how women on diets couldn't start talking about dieting. Her solution to the matter? When I have to diet, I stay in bed for 4 days till it's over. Well, there was also stories of her sneaking down to the refrigerator in the middle of the night to gorge on cheesecake, which she said she loved. At parties, she preferred milk or tomato juice to cocktails. She loved drive-in hamburgers. Outspoken, sometimes tactless, and too candid for MGM's comfort. Studio occasionally forbid her to speak to reporters, feeling she might criticize their mishandling of her career. So which Hedy LaMarr were we talking about? The one that slept in makeup and loathed modern women, or the whip-smart, sardonic lady who loved junk food and had no patience for pretense? Well, the actual truth was she was somewhere in between. MGM wanted the former, a cool, dark glamour girl, to replace the fading Joan Crawford or retiring Garbo. And LaMarr, whether she realized it or not, was actually the replacement for Garbo. She's meant to be the exotic foil to their new darling, Lana Turner. Turner glowed with fresh American sunshine, and LaMarr shimmered with old world mystery. Well, she wasn't a strong actress. Beautiful, yes. Poised, certainly. But acting really wasn't her natural gift. After Algiers, MGM struggled to find a suitable follow-up. Growing restless, she told Photoplay if the studio didn't find her another role soon, she'd take her grievances straight to gossip columnist Jimmy Fiedler. Well, that kind of threat in those days could rattle any studio executive, and MGM scrambled to put her in a new project. She starred in I Take This Woman opposite Spencer Tracy. On paper, it seemed a perfect match. Joseph von Sternberg, the director who sculpted the Marlene Dietrich's image, could communicate with LaMarr in German, coaxing out a performance. LaMarr was even touted as Dietrich's natural successor. But Sternberg was frankly impossible to work with. MGM replaced him just weeks into filming. And, of course, the story itself didn't help. LaMarr played a woman whose glamour derails her husband's altruism, tempting him away from helping the poor toward a life of luxury. She looked magnificent, but the role made her cold and unsympathetic. Well, despite reshoots and reworking, MGM recognized a disaster in the making. But the press had already caught wind of the troubles. Luckily for the studio, Hedy's off-screen life supplied all the publicity they needed. In Hollywood's talent was actually secondary. What mattered was her myth, and LaMarr, scandal or not, was becoming a myth. Well, she was married 6 times. And her personal life became a tabloid jackpot. Like Real Housewives said in 1939. Well, Gardner, who was not leading man material, according to Hollywood, also had an estranged wife in Britain. A little bit of an inconvenience in Hollywood's moral code, and either MGM or LaMarr herself decided it was time to cut the ties. He was replaced by Gene Markey. LaMarr was dropping quotes to the press about their future together. Well, it's becoming very clear to MGM that LaMarr would always be the beautiful outsider, the alluring complication, a woman who, no matter how many roles she played, never truly be allowed to reinvent herself. Well, as I say, she had been working on a number of things on her own time, one of which became essential to the war effort, helping torpedoes hit their targets, electronically, that is. Well, she came out with a memoir in 1967 called Ecstasy and Me, Promising Scandal and Confession. The book was filled with lurid descriptions of her love life and alleged escapades, many of which LaMarr insisted had been fabricated by her ghostwriter. Sued the publisher for libel, and in essence, she was suing her own autobiography. In the court, the defense argued with cynicism that LaMarr's reputation was already so notoriously bad the book couldn't possibly harm her any further. They claimed she'd always been known for a lack of morality, integrity, and honest dealing. The judge, for his part, described the book as filthy, nauseating, and revolting, but ruled against her. Lifelong reputation as the ecstasy girl made it easy to believe every sordid word. Well, she withdrew from the world and went to Florida. Her name actually became a punchline. If you remember Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddle, the villain was named Hedy LaMarr. Became an ongoing gag throughout the film. 1991, she made headlines again for all the wrong reasons. Caught stealing $20 worth of eye drops and laxatives from a pharmacy. And for a woman once hailed as the most beautiful woman in the world, it was a cruel ending. Well, behind the tabloid caricatures and the failed marriages and her fall from grace, she'd always been something more. An inventor, an icon, a reminder of how merciless Hollywood could be to women who refused to stay one thing for long. Ironically, her story was beginning when Hollywood thought it had ended. In the decades after her stardom faded, her legacy underwent one of the most dramatic reversals in film history. Same woman who once had been dismissed as a scandal, a seductress, and a tabloid casualty was reborn as something entirely different. A visionary inventor, a symbol of female intelligence, and a pioneer whose ideas helped lay the groundwork for modern wireless communication, the very foundation of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular technology. LaMarr had always possessed an inventive streak. She loved to design, to tinker, to imagine improvements to everyday things. Among the papers found after her death were sketches for a functional, disposable accordion-type attachment for any size of Kleenex box, a compartment where you'd put used Kleenex, as well as the designs for a glow-in-the-dark dog collar, anti-wrinkle device inspired by the same accordion principle, and countless other curious, practical contraptions. But none of this creativity had any place in the roles life had given her. Back in Austria before her escape, she'd mantled with entertaining engineers and military men who discussed ideas for what they call frequency hopping, a way of sending radio signals that could not be intercepted. Nothing came of it at the time. The war distracted them, but when LaMarr listened and learned and remembered, years later, living in America under the name of Hedy LaMarr Markey, crossed paths at a Hollywood party with the avant-garde composer George Antheil. According to Antheil's eccentric memoir, their first conversation began when LaMarr asked him for advice on how to make her small bust appear fuller, which he gallantly replied her figure was perfectly fine, very post-pituitary. Somehow, from that odd beginning, the two drifted into discussion about wartime communications. And Antheil, though unconventional, was a fitting collaborator. His musical experiments often used synchronized player pianos, and that technology became the model for their shared invention. And together, they developed a system in which torpedoes could transmit coded signals by rapidly changing frequencies, essentially a form of radio encryption that would prevent detection or jamming. And in 1941, the two filed a patent for what they called the secret communication system. Although later Miss claimed that LaMarr had smuggled those blueprints out of Austria, it's more likely she carried the germ of the idea in her head, and finally, with Antheil's technical help, brought it to life. Small feature in Motion Picture Magazine that year broke the story under the playful headline, Hedy's Secret Weapon. That piece marveled that anybody as fabulously beautiful as Hedy LaMarr simply cannot possess brains. Patent number 2,292,387 proved otherwise. Well, Antheil himself gave LaMarr full credit, insisting his role was merely mechanical. An article captured Hollywood's confusion perfectly, calling her an enigma. The world wasn't ready for a woman like Hedy LaMarr, especially one who was both brilliant and possibly beautiful. The U.S. Navy dismissed the design as impractical, and the idea is quietly shelved. She never mentioned it publicly again, not even in her memoir. Decades later, her invention resurfaced. In 1973, the organizers of the first National Inventors Day decided to add a touch of glamour to their press materials by highlighting female inventors who had changed the world in unexpected ways. Alongside homemakers who'd streamlined cooking and cleaning appeared Hedy LaMarr, the actress that made missiles stealthier. Well, she was astonished. She had long assumed that patent had been forgotten. In fact, the principle behind her invention, frequency hopping, had become vital to military communications during the Cold War. According to legend, its application in missile guidance systems was part of the strategic advantage that helped the U.S. outmaneuver the Soviets during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, unfortunately, didn't do much for her Hollywood career. When she died in 2000 at the age of 86, she left behind wealth and privacy and a myth that was finally being rewritten. As critic Barbara Rose observed, it was only after her death and symbolically the disappearance of her physical body that the site of so much projection and scandal, her image could be reclaimed. The face that had once imprisoned her was gone, and the mind behind it could finally take center stage. 2003, she was reborn in full as a feminist and scientific icon. Appeared on the cover of Dignifying Science, stories about women scientists. Her name was actually attached to Austria's National Innovation Prize, and her birthday became European Inventors Day. Today, she's remembered as the ecstasy girl and more as the woman whose ingenuity made your phone, your wireless headphones, and your world all possible. It's a fascinating story. It feels almost too perfect. Well, according to Hedy LaMarr, any girl can be glamorous. All she has to do is stand still and look stupid. And that was her general attitude. Well, there's been a lot of strange and unusual stories we've talked about. And I think the fact that a Hollywood actress could create all the marvels we have today is just absolutely mind-blowing. You know, there was an idea that the military had promised that she helped further. They said there'd be military weather control by 2025. If you look up in the sky at dawn, you'll see contrails crisscrossing the sky. They look like chalk lines on a blue-black board. To most onlookers, they're the harmless exhalations of a high-altitude jet. But to a growing faction of watchers, these plumes are the handwriting of an invisible war. A war to seize the most ancient battlefield of all, the weather itself. According to the theory, and it's a conspiracy theory to be frank, the U.S. Air Force, in partnership with private aerospace firms and intelligence contractors, set a classified objective in the late 1990s. They're going to have full spectrum operational dominance of the Earth's atmosphere by 2025. Program's rumored arsenal spans cloud microphysics and ionospheric heaters and nanoparticle aerosols and even a triggered flex of tectonic plates. Supporters of this theory claim that by mastering storms, droughts, and quakes, the Pentagon could gain the ultimate silent weapon. Calamity disguised as coincidence. You know, weather warfare is not a modern fever dream. Ancient besiegers beat drums to summon rain over enemy harvest. Medieval kings hired alchemists to deflect lightning from castles. 1946, General Electric successfully seeded a cloud over New York with dry ice, shocked meteorologists with a snow squall materialized out of clear sunshine. 2 decades later, during the Vietnam War, U.S. forces conducted Operation Popeye, released silver iodide over the Ho Chi Minh Trail to lengthen the monsoon season. Skies have long been considered terrain that the military could use. Only question is how precisely you can steer them. Conspiracy theories describe a secret memorandum, sometimes called Directive A36, sometimes called the Weather Ascendancy Roadmap, signed in the autumn of 2005, updated every 4 years. According to the mandate, by year 2025, they want to enable field commanders to shape meteorological outcomes within theater at strategic, operational, and tactical scales. Document supposedly breaks mastery into 5 milestones. Number 1 is micro-scale cloud sculpting. Number 2 is regional precipitation denial. Tropical cyclone vectoring, when operational in 2017. Seismic inducement via atmospheric coupling. It was working in 2021. And planetary weather arbitration. The target for that was 2025. Each milestone is rumored to nest subprograms with eccentric code names. Project Cirrus Fang, Eon Maelstrom, and Argus Seed, sprawling across the budgets of a half a dozen federal agencies. And the most visible piece of the theory is, frankly, over our heads: chemtrails. Believers argue not all contrails are equal. Some fade in minutes, others smear into cirrus veils that linger for hours, whitening the noon sky. According to the narrative, aircraft fitted with retrofitted dispersal canisters emit a proprietary cocktail of barium and aluminum oxide and polymer-bound metallic nanoparticles. These particles are said to serve 3 converging purposes. They create an electrostatic latticework. They have cloud condensation nuclei. They seed moisture, enabling rain on demand, or conversely drawing humidity away from target regions. And there's solar management. By reflecting select wavelengths, aerosols can raise or lower surface temperatures, tilting pressure cells that give birth to storms. Skeptics claim that jet fuel simply freezes in the frigid upper atmosphere, but chemtrail watchers compile photos of nozzles protruding from plane fuselage, and voices for bulk aluminum powder delivered to Air Force bases, and whistleblower diaries describing midnight tanker flights with suspicious payloads. Well, none of this has, of course, pierced the armor of official denial, but the streaks above cities do grow denser year by year. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow and talk about more strange topics. But until then, if you watch Blazing Saddles and hear the banter about Hedy LaMarr, think about that beautiful actress. It was more than just a pretty face. Actually created the basis of the cell phone you carry in your pocket. So until tomorrow at this time, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great evening.